Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. I mean, we started this a little bit as an initiative at the very beginning of COVID, and now we're probably around session number 11 or 12 of this mining COVID chat every Tuesday. So I do appreciate you taking a break if you're on the East Coast, or starting your day in Vancouver, like Adrian, probably starting your morning coffee before a busy day of work. As I was, today we have the pleasure to welcome Adrian Rothwell from Lucky Minerals, a junior mining company that you probably have heard of in recent months and years, mostly focusing on Ecuador. And this will be the opportunity for us to discuss the investment scene for junior mining actors, and especially also how COVID-19 changes a lot of the realities for different companies operating as junior miners across in different jurisdictions. We also have with us Santiago Yepez. Santiago, I think I can see you, so you can wave if you want. Santiago has been, a member of those coffee chat from the very first beta version, so he's one of the pillars of these initiatives. And it's very nice to have you with us. As always, I'm going to start with something that has never been one of my main pleasures, which is just reading the. Well, actually, I got to find it first. But first of all, I'll maybe turn first to Adrian. First of all, to thank you again for being with us. Maybe Adrian, can you introduce yourself a little more, and more specifically also maybe introduce Lucky Mineral as a developing junior mining company in the Americas specifically, please.
Sure, Remy. A pleasure to be here. Pleasure to speak to all of you. So myself, I'm the president and CEO of Lucky Minerals, and I have been a part of this company only recently, since September last year. So Santiago, who will also be on the call, is the long-time representative of our company here in Ecuador. Lucky Minerals has two projects, but the project that we are focused on mainly is the Ecuador project, Fortuna. We're in South Central Ecuador with about a 55,000 hectare concession. We've recently reset the company with a new management team. We've restructured our capital and financed our exploration program for this year. Excuse me, during what has been an interesting time for sure since February. So that's us.
Wonderful. And maybe just as I said, as a tradition, as I was saying, I will start with a little legal notice that we have to go through. Sorry for that. The opinions expressed by today's panelists are their personal views and may not reflect the views of the organization that they represent. Whenever possible, America's Market Intelligence has verified the accuracy of the information provided by third parties, but does not under any circumstances accept responsibility for any inaccuracies should they remain unverified. It is expected that webinar attendees will use the information provided in this webinar in conjunction with other information and with sound management practices. MMI therefore will not assume responsibility for commercial loss due to business decisions made based on the use or non-use of the information provided in today's webinar. So as you can tell, my French accent hasn't improved since last week, and it's still the same message. I might just use a recorded message next time. But now that we've gone through, the hoops and hurdles of the beginning of this coffee chat, maybe I'll turn to Santiago, so just so you can introduce yourself. Santiago, can you just maybe mention the development of Lucky Minerals specifically in Ecuador, and the strategic decision that you've done in that Latin American jurisdictions, and what the level of development of your operations there? Then I probably will turn back to Adrian to just discuss much more the junior mining scene in general. Please, Santiago, nice to have you aboard.
Thank you, Remy. It is a pleasure to join again the coffee chats. As you said, I am a participant since the beginning. I think it's a good option to start talking with a coffee, an informal chat, and to see how the mining sector is developing mainly in Latin America. Well, I think it is important first to mention that Ecuador was an oil country. So we just don't have a long history in industrial mining. We have had an interesting background in the small scale mining of course, developed mainly by Ecuadorians. But now we have two large scale mines on production. One is Fruta del Norte and the other one is Mirador. Those two projects started production at the end of 2019. So we are just what the people are calling the new frontier. And why Ecuador is the new frontier? It's just because Ecuador, it's an unexplored country. Companies have explored no more than 8% of the national territory. So that gives a lot of space for new companies. It is important also to remember that Minister Javier Cordova issued 275 new concessions. After the mandate in 2018, there was no possibility to obtain concessions until, let's say, June, July of 2016. So was lucky to get 12 of those concessions. I think we are very well located. It is a very interesting zone. We are in the southern part of Ecuador, in the provinces of Azuay, Morona, and Zamora, very near to some interesting projects as Fruta del Norte, Mirador, El Mozo, Cangrejos from Lumina, and other interesting projects. So I think we have plenty of space to develop our exploration projects here in Ecuador.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, if anyone among the attendants is more specifically interested in Ecuador, I think on our LinkedIn group, which was in the invitation, if you want to register on that LinkedIn group, there's a series of interviews and panels with the vice ministers of mines of Ecuador, with different actors that are operating in Ecuador, so that will give anyone interested in that jurisdiction a lot of additional information. Obviously, Santiago always answers questions. I mean, I've been the one bugging him on a regular basis for the last few years on understanding Ecuador as a jurisdiction. But I'd like to take just maybe one step back and turn to Adrian. Adrian, you have a strong experience of junior mining. If I'm not wrong, you've been working with heading junior mining companies, or as working with them since the early 1990s. So I'm sorry, I just threw at your age right there. But yeah, but basically I'm trying to understand, you're going through COVID-19 as a crisis. The junior mining world has been through a series of different similar crises, obviously different, and difficulties in either finding financing or being able to move projects in different jurisdictions. How do you rate the disturbances of 2020 compared to what we've seen over the last 20, 30 years?
Loaded question. Well, I mean, first of all, the junior mining sector really moves from one crisis to the next. It seems to have been that way for quite some time. We've had some brief glimmers of general positiveness in the industry in the mid 2000s, but the business is hard. I mean, you are going into other countries, usually countries that the management teams, certainly from a head office perspective, are not familiar with. You're learning very quickly. That is learning the technical side of the business, geological, or the social aspects and social norms and of the project itself and the country. Yeah, so leading that into where we are now with COVID, I think from my perspective, you have a number of complexities that COVID will impact, and I think the biggest one for us is social impact. I mean, you are now going to start seeing people being a little more wary of outsiders coming in to the business and to their provinces or cantons in our particular case. I think that they're going to be much more wary of what outsiders are going to be bringing in, certainly from a COVID perspective. And I think companies that have had a strong social presence are going to be ultimately more successful than those that just helicopter in, do a geological program, and helicopter out again. I'm using helicopter as a metaphor, but so for us at Lucky, luckily for us, we focused very early in terms of getting a local team, having a local exploration presence. Local being, I mean, it's hard to find. So definitely we've had to hire from outside of the cantons that we are in, but certainly our focus has been on getting an Ecuadorian team, and that is actually paying off for us right now, because for us to bring in outside geologists, well, we have to deal with a 2-week quarantine. That costs us time and money, whereas currently we're able to get started as quickly as possible on an exploration program.
If you're looking at everyday life, so obviously, I mean, we attend the same conferences usually. We do talk to the same people. Usually me more on behalf of majors or looking from the angle of the investors. You come usually as a junior miner. How things have changed lately when you look at your everyday life? Obviously, I'll ask the same question to Santiago, how he operates on the ground and how they're looking at potential exploration campaigns and how this has been potentially postponed for a few days or weeks. What has been the changes of COVID-19 on the life of a president and CEO of a developing junior mining company?
Well, certainly less travel. It's daylighted a couple of things, though. Perhaps some of the travel that we've been doing in the past is not necessary. We've been able to set the table for meetings, set the terms, get to the point very quickly. Certainly, I think we're in the middle of a fundraise right now. We've just done a share consolidation and a reset of Lucky Minerals. That fundraise is going well, but it's taken a lot longer than perhaps it would have pre-COVID. And I think that's partly a function, we're bringing in some new shareholders that I have not met. So there's a trust issue there for sure. And, if you want to start talking about social license and the like.
Well, I'll get there. Don't worry, I will get there.
Trust issues coming in there too. But I think that the length of time taken is a function of a lot of investment offices, brokerages and the like, not really being set up to the work from home. So things are just taking longer.
Perfect. And maybe
lost everyone.
But I'm gonna turn to Santiago, because I don't know if Adrian has connection issues. Maybe I don't know but I'm hearing him a little bit robotic. Santiago, maybe turning to you, Santiago. How has COVID impacted the programs? And we've talked a lot, you and I, in Ecuador, about engaging with communities and trying to explain to different stakeholders the kind of value that can be brought to the territory from a mining company. How has these been impacted, the plans that you had, that we had discussed on January, February? How has it been impacted over the last few weeks and months? And how did you regulate differently your kind of workload and objectives for 2020?
Yeah, the emergency here started around March the 15th. Yep. Just when we arrived from PDAC. I think it was a good PDAC for Ecuador, by the way. But after that, we had some people at the field. We had our team on the field. So we were supposed to close our activities on the field around the 20th of March. So it was, let's say, some kind of perfect for us, because we were able to take our people from the field and take them home and send our manager of geology to Vancouver. So it took too long. It's around 3 months. We were supposed to went to the field and start some operations 1 month ago, but unfortunately this is taking a little bit long. But that gives us the opportunity to restructure the company. As Adrian was saying, we have a new members and new advisors on the board. That is really good for the project, very experienced people. And of course, that gives us the opportunity to see how to develop the best protocols to work again. I think that is one of the most important things. Unfortunately, as I was saying, industrial mining is not well known here in the country. So mainly the communities and the local leaders are trying to stop the development of the mining sector just because they are afraid, not because of mining, because of people, transportation of goods, transportation of people moving from different locations. So I must say, most of the companies, including the two companies that are in production right now, Fruta del Norte with Landin and Ecuacorriente with Mirador, they stop also the activities. I would say probably 95% of the companies stop their projects. So the central government issued a regulation with minimum requirements, let's say a local protocol to restart activities again. I think that is important. It is important to give certainty to the people. It is important to have high standards, high quality standards, and try to develop our activities with international standards, of course.
Very good. And actually, just to build on this, and we have a question from Donald Sisk on chat. I'm always trying to pick up the question on the chat. He's actually talking about, I know he's very keen on technology and satellite geophysics to be able to find, good exploration spots. But I'm trying to get, a larger picture. We had to, all of us as an industry, we had to adapt to COVID-19. We had to change our ways of operating. I don't go to conferences anymore. So I have these, coffee chats that just actually was my daughter's idea. I shouldn't share this, but that was, and so, building this, and we'll continue it after COVID. I know, for example, of different, mining majors in which we're helping them doing, virtual public hearings, for example, developing the use of WhatsApp, Facebook, different tools. And even when COVID, when the pandemics hopefully will be a distant memory, all those tools will be useful to continue on the social license to operate effort. In your life as country manager in Ecuador, and I'll turn to Adrian also much more from the Vancouver office of liaising with new shareholders and new investors, is there a change that you have implemented over the last couple of weeks and months that you thought, well, maybe actually that makes a little more sense to do it this way, maybe having much more people on the ground, maybe using new technologies or having new processes and patterns that you will continue after the pandemics once this thing hopefully goes away very soon?
I think from the junior companies side, it is quite difficult to get new technologies or perform our geology work without going to the field. It is important to get there. It is important to mention that we have received our concessions probably 3 years ago with the package of 275 concessions issued by the government at that time. So work must be done on the field. Of course, we are taking all the requirements to go there and do it as fast as we can without being in contact with people too much. We are planning a geophysics around the area. But of course, we are taking as much technology as we can. Unfortunately, we are, let's say, a grassroots project with very interesting results in the last year. But of course, we will take advantage of the technology, mainly meetings. We have been working from home the last 3 months. That is teaching us a lot of issues. And of course, we will take advantage of this technology.
Perfect. I'll turn to Adrian, and then I probably will have a question on trust issues in communities and how using, working on COVID and sanitary and health issues, maybe to build bridges with them. But first, Adrian, when you're looking at, you mentioned, working with new shareholders, discussing with potential investors under new conditions, which is obviously, lack of travel and so on. What are the changes that you've seen recently that you think you'll be able to integrate into a post-COVID world? Because that was still an opportunity also of trying to create new types of bonds or relationship with people inside the industry?
Well, I think it's meetings like this to start with. Conferences. That's a bit of an unknown. Where are we going to go with networking and mining conferences in the future? That's going to be an interesting play. I think for us going into the future, we'll probably focus a lot more marketing digitally. And virtually, and looking at.
Oh, I think we might have lost Adrian. Santiago, I might turn to you if you don't mind for the next question, which was specifically regarding relationship with communities and how you can actually engage with them. And I have the opportunity of both discussing with you. We never worked AMI with Lucky Minerals on an official basis, but I have as many conversations with you as I have with some of your biggest opponents in Ecuador. So that's an interesting conversation that there is. The situation with COVID and the fact that communities or population in Zamora, Chinchipe, in Azuay might have needed a stronger presence from either governmental entities or private actors that are benevolent in their outreach to communities. How has that opened opportunities maybe to discuss with some of the communities and population living next or on the concessions of Lucky Minerals? How have you used that opportunity to just try to build new bridges with them?
Well, Remi, I think it is important to mention that we have a landowner and we own the concession. So probably there are two rights or two owners of the land. One owner of the land, I mean the surface, and the other one is the company who holds a title. So it is important to get to the communities knowing that we are visitors, probably that they own most of the land. And of course, knowing that after this pandemic, they are very afraid of getting contagious or any kind of problems related to COVID. The important thing is to bring high standards, to complete our protocols. As I was saying, government issue these minimum protocols that are very, very high standard protocols. And those protocols need to be communicated with the National Operations Committee and the local operations committee. That protocol needs to include results of the COVID tests of all of our personnel, including how are we going to transport our team, how many people is going to be there, for how long. So it is important to give certainty to the communities. It is important to give certainty to the local leaders, let's say the mayors of small cities. As you were saying, probably the province of Azuay, it is a very particular province with a lot of anti-mining activity. I have to say, this mining activity is also moving people who wants to be or who wants to run for presidency. We will have elections in the first months of 2021, sorry. So this will give probably some hard time to the mining companies. However, it is important to bring high standards, to be transparent to the companies. I was reviewing some interesting information of some good friend of us from Colombia, ACM from Colombia, and Brújula Minera. They develop a very interesting project in Colombia, and I think we should do the same project here. What the communities needs, what the communities thinks it is important for them. In Colombia, they have said, it is not important how many taxes do you pay, right? It is not important how much money do you invest in the country. It is important to have a transparent relation, to create jobs, to create and develop new projects around the mining project. I think that is the best option to get this social license. That it is not a document. It is a relationship that you create with your stakeholders during the existence of the project.
Very good. And I'm going to try again with Adrian. By the way, Adrian, you're on mute. You might want to take the mute off. Perfect. I'm asked Adrian to take off his video for having a better connection, since he's by far the most handsome of us three, and I put myself as second, Santiago. I'm sorry. I've asked Adrian to keep a photo of him. But going back, starting with the nonsense, we're looking at the future of what mining can actually, provide to the territory, and kind of economic development that can be led from further mining investment in different jurisdictions. I know you've actually written a very interesting paper, and you had a good presentation, Adrian, that we uploaded on that LinkedIn on your vision of commodity prices, especially gold prices. Maybe we can mention copper prices also, but what you see in terms of the future of those prices based on your knowledge of different, let's say, both markets, but also on the ground and development of a series of different projects. Could you maybe, Adrian, just address this and explain how you see the potential for junior miners in especially the gold sector based on the evolution of prices over the coming months and years?
Sure, and I apologize, everyone. I live in the backwaters in Canada here, so our internet connection isn't as good as anywhere else in the world, apparently. Yeah, so just in terms of gold price, I'm very bullish on gold. I've been bullish for a while, and perhaps I've picked what's happened this year in gold a little bit too early, but generally, in terms of how that affects junior miners, and we've got two markets. I mean, for junior miners to do well, you really need to see a strong gold price as well as a strong stock market, and we're getting that right now. At our end of the market, though, we're as Santiago had mentioned earlier, we're at the earliest stage of exploration. So we generally see the largest gains when markets are good, and of course we see capital evaporate from our end of the market, which is more speculative, earlier than other parts of the market. But having said that, I think given the performance of gold so far, I think we're still early in the bull market, and one of the slides that I showed Remi yesterday really shows how early we are compared to other gold bull markets. That capital comes into juniors in the seniors first. They're normally undervalued. It's easy money to make. They're more predictable. They have cash flow. It would then flow into the development companies. You've got feasibility studies. Projects are heavily de-risked, and that's what my last company was. At that time in the market, we were able to buy projects very cheaply. And de-risk them and get that re-rating. And now we're starting to see money go into earlier stage projects, and that's only really just started this year. And so I think in terms of gold and gold price, obviously I'm bullish. I think given what's going on has been going on in terms of quantitative easing and very aggressive monetary policy by governments. I think that assets such as gold have proven themselves to have a good real value. I also think that we've seen it range bound this year, but I do see it inflation risk as being much higher in the Western world anyway. And really, when you think of gold price, you have to think of the U.S. economy. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to see a double down on gold itself. And by natural progression, you will see people looking for outperformance in gold and by investing in juniors. So I think the outlook is good. I think that COVID, however, provides a little bit of uncertainty and volatility in that too, so which may not be good. People are very worried about liquidity, for instance, and the first thing that you will see them sell will be strong performing assets like gold. I think yeah, that would be the broad strokes of my outlook on that, and I think that when you start looking at investing in juniors, I think that's where you start looking at quality of projects, quality of management teams. Are they focused on execution on that project, or there's 1,100 juniors just in Vancouver, so are they focused on other things?
No, I think you mentioned something that is in itself very interesting, in the sense that the quality of the management team is often what makes or breaks a project. I mean, we've seen a series of interesting projects in terms of geology, in terms of even when you look at the bottom line and the capacity in terms of economic return of some of those concession based on royalty prices and other, when you actually see in the long term. But those projects never really took off or were unable to be well developed because of under par management team. And I think that's something that most people are starting to see from my perspective of the investor circles, and we see more and more questions that are not so much about do you think that the data and the drilling campaigns came out with the right results that we hope to see, and looking at some limited elements of operational risks, to now really focusing on what do you think about this CEO or this country manager, will they get the job done, or will they understand the particularities of the jurisdictions, of the specific above the ground risk that the company is facing, and also do they actually talk to each other very well? I mean, right now I know that Santiago and yourself, you're on the same line, but you can't believe the amount of companies that we work with, not even juniors, sometimes sometimes majors also, where you have discrepancies between the communication between the different layers, and that's something that is essential. And I assume that with COVID-19, the incapacity of different people to go on the ground, the complications of bringing data, and obviously you can send most of the information through email, through new technology, but there's an understanding of the realities of the ground. That's something it might be missing if we continue looking for several months of pandemics, for example, or several waves of these pandemics. We will have to make a clear understanding of how we bridge those gaps, how we bring really the realities of the ground further than just raw data, but also a qualitative understanding of what some projects are moving forward, some are not. And that's part, I think, that I don't know, Santiago, I don't know if you want, from your perspective, how do you work on a daily basis? I mean, you've seen several junior mining companies, you've seen major companies, you were leading the Chamber of Mining of Ecuador. That's how we met the first time. How do you see, I mean, obviously you can tell me that Lucky Minerals is the best performing junior, okay, but let's forget about this. What makes a difference between a well-developing junior mining companies to another one that struggles? You've seen several companies in Ecuador, don't bring names obviously, but we have examples in our mind that we know that are good companies out there are not. What determines a good junior mining companies to another one that actually will just lose your money?
Well, Remi, I must say we have seen a lot of transactions in the last months, including in these last 3 months.
Yep.
Ecuadorian companies, I mean, junior companies that are located in Ecuador receiving funds. We have seen in the news important transactions with majors. I think majors are interested in Ecuador because, as I was saying, is the new frontier, is an unexplored country. And of course, we need to have a clear line, a clear support from the government. It doesn't matter if it's a right-wing or left-wing government. We need to have a clear path to continue working. I think it is important to say that in Ecuador, major companies are exploring. That is interesting. That give us the idea of the interest of the important mining companies of being in Ecuador. And of course, that is giving the industry high standards. It doesn't matter if we have a very good or a very bad regulation. Of course, it is better if we have a good regulation, but high standards that international companies are bringing will give you a baseline of what to expect from them. I think the mining chamber has been working very hard to fulfill those standards and to provide all the stakeholders about what is industrial mining, what do we bring to the communities, empowerment, and that kind of stuff. So I think it is important to see that Ecuador is finally moving, that Ecuador, despite this COVID thing, of course, it is an important issue, but the mining sectors, the mining companies are getting funded. So that means that the interest in gold, in junior companies, in medium and large companies is still in the air. So I think we should take advantage of this situation and trying to develop our project in the best possible way.
Very good. And maybe back to you, Adrian, moving away from Ecuador, I know you have a clear focus on Ecuador, but when you interact, whether at the conferences, the Mines and Money, the 121, or, you know, when you interact with investors, or when you talk to them on a daily basis, what are the questions that, you know, they bring to your attention? Obviously, I assume they have to do with geology and finances and others, obviously. But are there new questions that you have seen rising over the last 1 or 2 years? Social license to operate, you know, above the ground risk. What are the new questions that have been raised to your attention that you think will have even more momentum and importance over the next coming years?
Well, I think certainly social license to operate is embedded in the questions that I'm being asked. Some investors are directly asking questions around social license, but most of the questions really are around two things. When are you going to start working? When are you going to drill? When can we expect results from drilling? Okay. So really, it's fundamentally driven. People want to know that you're getting down to the project and doing the work. So what does that involve? Well, for us, it's having a clear positive social review first for us to get to the project. And our team looks at logistics. They literally talk to everyone in the community that is impacted. It's doing stakeholder mapping, doing all of this kind of what you would consider ultimately boring work, but necessary, absolutely necessary. And I think one thing that COVID has perhaps impacted is the need for us to do that properly before we go to the field. And so things are taking a little bit longer. Perhaps we're not just able to go out and send a team to the field just immediately, but I think overall that's good. I mean, I think our long-term returns are going to be way more, way stronger because of it. We'll have social license to absolutely go to the site and operate as they get to know our teams, and that's something that the previous management team perhaps didn't have in our other project in Montana. You know, I'm not afraid of saying that, and this is why we've refocused to Ecuador, which we have found to be a much better jurisdiction for us to operate. We have the support, as Santiago has mentioned, of the federal government. I think that has to be unwavering in terms of supporting the junior mining sector, but also I think that it's up to the junior mining sector and seniors that are operating there already to do it right. And we've been very fortunate that we have garnered the interest of First Quantum Minerals to work with us as well to to work on the project. So it's really two teams that are working under one umbrella on the Fortuna project. And that was one of the first questions they had was, have you done your social baseline? So.
No, absolutely. I mean, I would actually agree and disagree with agree with something and disagree with something else with you, if you don't mind, Adrian. First of all, on First Quantum, it's true. I mean, I keep hearing, and we had actually Alberto Casas, at the very first week of COVID-19, talk to us about what First Quantum was doing on their mining site, and I've heard several times of the quality of the support that they can bring to some other junior mining companies and to a series of different projects. So that's just confirm again the quality of First Quantum as a company and managerial team. The area where I disagree with you is when you actually mention boring stuff as stakeholder mapping. For me, it's not boring. I wake up in the morning and just want to do more stakeholder mapping because I think what's very interesting, that's probably my socioeconomic and political science professor background. I want to understand what are the opposition forces and why are they opposed to a project, because 90% of the concerns, we might disagree on the margin with Santiago, but 90% of the concerns from community are actually very legitimate concerns, and sometimes problems of communication, problems of being able to speak the same language, of being able to talk to on using the kind of narrative and engagements and time that are needed to confront or discuss with communities that obviously work on a different time spectrum that a trader in Wall Street or a junior miner in investment relations in Vancouver. So it takes more time. But once you understand this, once you see how different stakeholders are connected with one another, why they might have in some cases criminal interest, in other just very general interest of being worried of a large development not far from their areas of life or the impact that it would have on their everyday life. All this, understanding the stakeholder mapping is really what makes the key to a successful project. And so for me, I think it's fascinating, and I know I know the human social quality of Santiago. We tend to be a little bit the life of the party when we actually go to mining events in Ecuador. But this is essential to be able to relay and move away from the cold image of the big mining extractive company, and rather show that we are all humans that actually interact with our environment, also understand the concerns of the community, and sometimes just try to find the right level of communication with people that would oppose the mine to explain them that there's a long-term dedication to either a project or to a territory for the development of this country. Mining companies will not go anywhere else and outsource production to China. They have to be tied to the territory. And maybe if I turn to you, Santiago, in terms of how you operate your own stakeholder mapping, what were your process? And I'm very, there's no conflict of interest since we haven't contributed to yours on that one. How did you develop it? I might criticize it after, watch out. But how do you actually, did you put it together, and how do you actually update it maybe on a regular basis to understand the evolution of the communities living in the area of influence of your project?
Well, Remi, for a junior company, the idea is to increase the value of the shareholder. But we need to find the right timing for everybody. If you just see the timing of the geologist team, they want to move very fast, right? Probably the social teams wants to be more conscious and try to have everything prepared for the geological team. We need to match those teams and try to see the best option for the long-term view of a project. So it is important, of course, to see who is around your project, who are the local leaders, what is the impact of, let's say, Yaku Perez, who is the prefect of Azuay, probably the biggest anti-mining name here in Ecuador, right? And I know you know him very well.
Very well, maybe not, but I know him.
but it is important to give certainty to the communities. What communities needs is jobs, to develop some projects with the communities, to receive, let's say, no benefits, but to receive some work that you can develop with them, projects that you can develop with the local communities. Communities are also receiving some support for this COVID issue from some mining companies here in Ecuador. So the best way to do it is to create a very strong relation with communities, create a a good relation with the local leaders. And probably the best way to do it is talking to them and be transparent. In our case, of course, we are doing initial exploration. That is a scientific issue. We can say we don't know if we are going to have a mining project in the future. So probably for us, it is more simple than trying to run a mine. However, we need to keep always the idea that what you need or what your goal is to create value for the company and to create value with your stakeholders. That idea it's been changing a lot in the last years. The main idea was just to create value for the shareholders. But now the idea is to create value for the communities around your project, to create value to the government, to create value for the company, of course, for the shareholder, and of course, try to develop a strong relation in the middle long term.
So a question to you specifically on junior mining and Ecuador, for example. I mean, when you mentioned different actors in Ecuador, you mentioned Fruta del Norte, you mentioned Ecuacoriente in Mineral, but those are companies that are very little to do with Lucky Mineral and junior miners, in the sense that they're already operating assets, they're producing, and so on. At the other end of the spectrum, I see regularly in Ecuador a variety of different actors, a variety of different juniors, some much better than some others, some very good, but all facing somewhat the same levels of opposition, or at least the incapacity to explain how mining can play a role into the sustainability of investment and the development of a country. And we see it whether you're looking at projects that are in Zamora, Chinchipe, in Morona, Santiago. The Warensa project is interesting when they actually develop a series of social approach to communities. You do a good job. Others don't do the same level of quality work. How is it possible at the level of a jurisdiction, and I asked maybe the former president of the CMA, okay, to unite those junior mining companies in understanding that rather than develop their own small protocol, one on each side, they might want to have a joint approach to engaging with communities, to engaging with above the ground risk, not specific communities. It could be preparing for the upcoming elections, understanding the economic risk to Ecuador, issues of operational issues that might be importing equipment to the countries. All this that has to some extent been talked in different conferences. When you come to the actual actionable information or trying to take decision, you continue seeing not only in Ecuador but in other countries also, each junior miner developing its own little plan, and sometimes losing a lot of money because that could be just mutualized with all the junior mining companies. I think Ecuador is a very interesting case study because it's this up and coming jurisdiction where a lot of junior mining companies have entered, but I still see these kind of discrepancies and incapacity to align interest between those different actors. So now I'm just putting that problems in your hands. How do we move this forward, and how we get sometimes Lucky Minerals talking with whether it has to be Solaris, INV Metal, or Adventus, people, I mean, obviously what I'm talking about, to actually engage into meaningful joint operations towards developing the vision of what junior mining and mining can bring to Ecuador.
Remi, I must say, of course, if you see the chain in the mining industry, we are very far away from, let's say, Landin or Corriente, that they are already on production, and we are far away from other projects that are in advanced exploration, probably economic valuation of the resources. But we have something very strong in common. That is telling the people what is responsible mining. I mean, it is easy to say we bring responsible mining, but what is responsible mining, right? It is bringing high standards, high quality standards, bring good and well-prepared personnel. So we have, as a mining companies in Ecuador, that goal to show not just the communities, to show the government, to show politicians, to show all the people in Ecuador what industrial and responsible mining brings to the country, brings to the communities. What can we create value for the government? It is important that all the people in Ecuador knows what is industrial mining. how we use water. In the past, and unfortunately, that is one of the biggest projects here in Ecuador, water or mining.
Yep.
In modern mining, it's water and mining at the same time. So that is a question from the past. So trying to explain the community, trying to explain the population of Ecuador, how do we work, how a mining project starts from initial mining, and how long it takes to get to a mine. We have Fruta del Norte, we have Mirador. They have started in the last years of the 90s. So we have a long terms. During the long terms, most of the companies will leave Ecuador. Let's say if in Lucky we have around 55,000 hectares. If we are very lucky and we discover a project, we will have probably the 10 or the 5% of the hectares we have right now. So it is important to create that good environment. And the idea, of course, is to keep working with majors, with juniors, with the mining chamber, with the professionals, and that is what we need to do to keep educating people about responsible mining.
But so let's look at, when you say what we need to do, let's look at how we do it. And first of all, educate is sometimes a term that, communities opposing to mining don't like when miners say, let me educate you, or let me pull you out of poverty, which I heard from a couple of times, just that's seen as the arrogance of the mining world from the perspective of communities. I'm going to play the devil's advocate here, okay? When you're a junior miner, yes, you're the first one entering a territory, meaning that you're the first contact sometimes, or your first geologists are the first one to interact with communities who have no idea really what the impact of mining could be, can sometimes rely on images, let's say from the 1980s in a jurisdiction in Africa, believing that this is what's going to happen in Ecuador, or just bad experiences from other cases. You tell me that you have to make the case, but to be very honest, when I talk to you, I haven't talked to Yaku in a while, but I wouldn't talk to people from Pachacutic, Ecuador, Conaya that are very deadly opposed to mining. They just tell us, mining companies, whatever they tell us, we're not going to believe them because they are part of the equation. They're going to tell us whatever they want so that they can sell their product. And to a certain extent, the actor that should be legitimately the actor to bridge between mining communities and mining companies, which is the national state. In the case of Ecuador, in certain region, it's hard when you're coming from Quito because of history to make a point in Zamora, Chinchipe, Monona, Santiago, which sometimes see Quito, the prefects or the representative of the government as just someone that is not from the cradle of the province and will just force mining companies down your throat because they want to have royalties. And those royalties will never trickle down to the territory, first for different measures, also for corruption. So I just set the table here, okay? So how do we move forward from the fact that, they will not trust you, they will not trust the government? How do you bring, we've talked with EITI, we've talked with different universities, the San Francisco is doing a good job in Ecuador, but how does the mining sector puts together a series of, let's say, less criticizable in the sense that, less biased actors, not only mining companies, but maybe more academics, maybe more NGOs or microcredit or, mines to market pact for sustainability of supply sources and others, to put them in the equation here so that they actually are trusted by the opponents to mining and they actually can relay some of the good message from the mining industries, because there are some of them. How do we move forward on this? Because junior miners don't have the budgets to do this. Or when they do, they have to be very cautious about, each cent that they're paying. Not so much, everyone has to do that, majors, also investors. But in the case of Ecuador, we're still, trying to see how can we get those bridges and those areas of communication open without having a frontal opposition between Yaku on one side and mining companies on the other.
I think a key component here is the government. If you have a government that gives support to the mining sector, don't forget that all the population of Ecuador are the owners of the natural resources. If the government, as representative of those people, provides good information about mining, provides the best, let's say, legal framework, or if the government provides a good tax regime, good companies are going to be here. So I think also a good idea that we have been discussing here in Ecuador, mainly with the chamber, and it's joined, let's say, the ITI, or the chamber is now a member of the ICMM, so having good standards, creating a round table with the stakeholders without your hat, and try to talk about the needs of the population, not the needs of the mining sector, not the needs of the communities, or not the needs of politicians, just to create a good environment for the country. If we say what happened in Ecuador in the last months, as you all might know, Ecuador is mainly an oil country. The oil price was very low, so we were losing a lot of money. Producing a barrel of oil was expensive. It was very expensive. It was probably producing much higher price than the price of sale. The pipelines were broke. We have the COVID, so we need to get funds from somewhere, right?
So let me surf on this, if you don't mind, because we just have 5 minutes, and I understand the role of the government, but to be honest with you, as much as I like the different ministers of vice ministers of mines in Ecuador, the idea is you need the government, but you need other actors in the government, meaning that we're trying a lot, especially in Colombia, in Peru, in a different jurisdiction in Africa, to get ministers of health, or minister of education, or minister of infrastructure, which is sometimes a little easier, to get engaged into those conversations, meaning that, the mining company just is not only about mining, if you want to make the case of value creation in the territory, it's also about building school or making sure that there's the right, health protocol there. That's the first thing. The second thing that I wanted to bring to your attention is, I understand your perspective and your efforts to just, push the narrative of pro-mining, which makes sense. And I can talk to you as a friend, as a country manager. I know you're not the type of country manager that will just say, I can do it by myself, because he doesn't want to tell his boss in Vancouver that he might need help. There are some areas that the mining company can do, only a third party can do, or only governmental actors or NGO can do. But how can we move forward to having sometimes, sorry for my words, a decrease sometimes of arrogance or self-assuredness of country managers, of junior miners, or of large mining companies, understand the need to have backup to bridge to the communities, and have all those actors, bring out more than the usual suspect: country manager, mining minister, investor, and maybe a PR company. Communities don't trust this anymore. We're talking about population that already are against private actors in many aspects for political or ideology perspective. And when it comes from a mining company coming in, it's just, you can pour $10 billion into it, or 1 cent. The impact will almost be the same. Sorry to be very, very blunt on you. And the idea might be just to try other ways of communicating. And you have 2 minutes to answer to this. Good luck with that, Maria Santiago.
I think it is important to understand what the communities needs, what are their expectations, what the local leaders wants from the mining companies, what the local leaders needs from the central government. Of course, in the past, mainly in the oil sector, all the money came to the city. So right now, we have the obligation to have a legal domicile where our project is located. It is an important thing. We have, because we pay taxes where the project is located. Another thing is, if you get into production, most of the royalties will have to go by law to those communities. Of course, that doesn't belong, or it is not a responsibility of the company, but corresponds to the government. But the company must look that the funds that you are providing to the government really goes to where it needs to go. That is, projects in the community. So creating this big change of value is what probably it is the interesting thing in the mining sector.
Perfect. No, very interesting. Thank you very much, Santiago. I have a last question on royalties, streaming contract, financing alternatives to junior mining companies. That was the ideas of questions I wanted to have for Adrian, but he had internet connection issues. That's why he's not with us anymore. But we'll bring this to another another opportunity on next Tuesday or in 2 weeks with either someone from a streaming company. I have 1 or 2 ideas in mind, or maybe a junior miner from his perspective on this, or a panel on this. So we'll address this specifically in the coming weeks. So don't worry, David. Any other questions or suggestions, just feel free to always send them to me. And you have I've actually copied it on the group chat, and I'm going to copy it again so that everyone have it. It's the link to our LinkedIn group if you want to download past events, presentations, slides, interviews, studies that we do. Everything's for free. We're trying to spread around best practices and showcase how we can make a point to help sustainable investment in the mining sector and creation of value for the territory, both for communities and for junior miners like my dear friend Santiago. Santiago, ha sido un placer hablar contigo. Nos vemos la próxima vez. And I hope for all of you guys that COVID is going to be just in the past very soon, so that we can all go back and travel and meet at airports or different cities around the world. I wish you a very good day, and looking forward to being with you again today. Santiago, cheers.
Well, Remi, you can find me, and all the members of this coffee chat can find me at LinkedIn. Yep. As I was saying, I think that Ecuador is a new frontier, definitely. We have a lot to offer. Of course, as Ecuadorians, we also require good companies with high standards to create this chain of value, to share this value with the government, with the communities, with the shareholders. I think that's the best way to do it. I am happy to assist if someone has any questions about the project, about the country. And my friend, it's been always a pleasure to join this coffee with you.
Yeah, I can tell you're always happy to be on this coffee. Much better than just seeing me in person in Ecuador. I can tell you're much happier now. Cheers, guys. Have a wonderful day, and looking forward to being with you next week. Bye.